What's up, Greg? How's it going, my guy? We talked about it briefly before the show started here. It's been in some ways such a long season, but in others, it's kind of just flown by. How are we doing today and how are we feeling?
I'm feeling great. I enjoy. I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I
Me
enjoyed.
too.
I enjoyed that win over Georgia last night, and I enjoy reading and seeing all the crying done by Georgia fans and SEC fans on X. And I never turn on Paul Feinbaum. I don't think I've watched 5 minutes of that show, but I made a day because he's going to come up with every excuse in the book.
What show is it?
Paul Feinbaum on the SEC network.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And he is just anybody who's not SEC is just scum of the earth. So,
man, SEC's always been a bit overrated. They are a huge conference, but I grew up a Notre Dame fan. I'd say over the last 10 years or so, I've kind of veered away from that in college football, and I watch more prospects. I don't have like a team there isn't a single team I watched every single game of, so it's not like I had Notre Dame on every week this year. But I did. Anytime Notre Dame has a big game, I had them on, and I'm rooting for them. I also like Ohio State too, though. So this weekend's college football playoffs went pretty well for me. I liked both those teams, and I wanted Texas to beat Arizona State just for competitiveness purposes in the next round.
Well, that game started out as a blowout, and then Texas just died, and Arizona.
I bet the over in that one, so I was sweating it out till the end, right at the end when they tied it up.
With Ohio State, I thought they might be dead men walking after the Michigan game.
I picked Ohio State.
I honestly did not think that Ryan Day was going to survive losing to them. Like, what is this, the fourth time in a row that he's lost?
0-4,
He's lost to Michigan. And that's just unheard of for Ohio State. And then he comes back in the playoffs and had two really strong games. And that's a credit to him. It's a credit to his team. And they got a lot of talent.
Yeah.
They may win the whole thing.
100%. And see, Kiyu said he wanted Arizona State to win so bad. For me, they just had no chance in the next round, I think, if they would have went on. So to me, I was not rooting for Arizona State. I do like the underdogs. I love the story. No, I love that Cam Scatterbo guy. Yeah, I knew someone was going to mention him. He's legit. I'd take him on the Bears, but just for the next round,
he's like a late day 3 guy. I bet you that guy doesn't look like he can run very fast.
Oh yeah, he'll probably be a day 3 guy.
Overachiever, but he's probably going to run about a 4.7.
About a 4.7.
4.65, 4.7.
I see him running maybe a little bit faster than that. I could see a 4.6.
But maybe. I think he's got a tough guy. No question, he's a tough guy. He's all heart. But I think
I thought it was a good week though. Did you? Were there any of the? So for me, there was a lot of offensive line players I was scouting. The biggest guys I was scouting were the 2 I think that could really be potential Bears picks coming up. Kelvin Banks Jr. I was watching him. Did you have a chance to watch his game? And
I thought that was actually one of Banks' weaker games.
I know how you feel about his height, but I'm just wondering how you felt he played this weekend and how he held up.
He gave up some pressures and stuff, which is unusual for him. In fairness, he's coming off an injury. He played, he missed like 3 weeks, played in the SEC championship game, then it came back for the playoffs so far. Is he really 100%? We don't know that.
Probably not.
Because I think he had a knee injury, but I don't know, how severe. It was severe enough to miss like 3 games.
Yep.
But I like him. I can't wait till Indy to find out exactly how tall he is, find out if he's going to be playing inside or outside. And it's the same thing with Campbell from LSU. He's tall enough to play tackle, but his arms may be too short.
Yeah, those are the 2 guys. I wish LSU would have made the tournament just to see more Will Campbell. But I watched a lot of Kelvin Banks. I was also studying Texas's center Jake Majors. And then I was also watching Ohio State. They have a left guard. Their left guard, Donovan Jackson, has stepped in at left tackle. Their left tackle.
He's played pretty darn good at tackle.
He played pretty well.
I mean, he's been playing there half the year. And that's a hard conversion going from inside to outside. And he's more than held his own. And I think he's really helped himself in the process.
Yep, 100%. I think he's a guy who was looked at probably as a third rounder. He's probably a second round guy now with potential to go up higher depending on how his off season goes. And have you thought about going to the Senior Bowl this year, or is that something probably
no?
not?
I know I don't. If I go to any, it'll be the East West because I'm on the committee for that. But I don't like, because of my lung condition, this time of the year I don't like to travel.
For sure. Got it.
I can't afford to catch anything, and on planes you're waiting to catch something.
And there's apparently a new something going around too. So we'll move into talking about Green Bay. Keith's already asking, are we beating Green Bay this weekend? I made a video yesterday. All right. So if we win, our draft pick pretty much stays at number 9. The worst it can go is 10th overall. So we have a top 10 pick guaranteed. If we lose,
reality is somewhere between 6 and 9.
Well, I figured out it actually can go up to 5. It'd be crazy, but we'd need the Panthers, Jets, Raiders, and Jags to all win, and we could land a top 5.
I don't want the Panthers to win because I want the good too.
Exactly. We want that better second round pick. So I'm rooting for my biggest thing. We've lost 11 straight to Green Bay, 10 straight games this season. I want to beat the Packers on Sunday. Do you think we have a chance?
No. And you know how positive I usually am.
Mm-hmm.
I just think now LaFleur is saying he's going to play the starters. How long? And then when you look at now I haven't paid that much attention to what's been in the media this week about the Bears, but the only thing I've looked at is the practice report, and they've been basically walkthroughs or light practices, but there's a lot of guys missing, and they're beat up bad enough already. They don't need more guys sitting out. So that's going to be tough. And Green Bay can't help itself winning. Really can't. They're stuck at where they are. They're at 7. True. So, whether they play their people a lot remains to be seen. If it's me and I'm the coach and this has nothing to do with playing the Bears, I might treat it like a preseason game and play them a quarter, and that's it. Because you can't, you don't want to have a chance of risking your key players to injury when the game means absolutely nothing.
Especially if the Bears players are coming out with fire and trying hard to win this game.
I mean, that'd be great if it was, but who knows? The only thing is, they're going to have the built-in excuse if the Bears win. Oh, the game meant nothing for us. We could care less. But
that's how it always is when we end up beating the Packers. There's nothing to play for, But for us, a win is a win. We've lost 11 straight to Green Bay, 10 straight games overall this season. I will say, I do believe there's a chance, especially if Green Bay does end up resting their starters. Not much to play for. Jeremy mentioned it here. Big game for the NFC North purposes Sunday night. It's Detroit versus Minnesota for the division. Any thoughts on that one?
Game is in Minnesota, right?
I'm not sure. Detroit? I can look it up real quick.
Doesn't matter. I mean, they're either way. It's a dome. I like Detroit. I think Detroit's got they're except when Buffalo played them, they've been really good. And Buffalo kind of exposed them a little bit, but Buffalo is right now maybe the best team in the AFC.
It's in Detroit. I just looked it up. Sorry. So that game's in Detroit. It is is that the Sunday night game? Yeah, it looks like there is not a Monday night game this week. It's the Sunday night game.
That's for the first seed. So they're going to be playing hard. They get the week off if they win. It's
for the number 1 seed and for the division. And a little Bears tidbit here. if we believe what Tom Pelissero says, and I know you can't always do that, but if the Lions do end up with that bye week, there's a chance we get our first interview with Ben Johnson within the next week. Do you have any thoughts on that one? Because Ben Johnson is definitely the hottest name going around right now.
Yeah, for sure, he's the hottest name. I mean, the hot names are Johnson, Vrabel, Brady from Buffalo. You can't have except for Vrabel, and if they want to interview Vrabel today, they can, because he walked away from his job in Cleveland as a consultant, so he's free to interview at any time, and you can do a more in-depth interview with him. With these guys that are going to be currently coaching,
yep,
you got a 3-hour window, and I think it's not even in person; it's more of a Zoom call.
And you also can't really hire them at that point because
no, you can't, and you're not going to hire somebody in a 3-hour conversation either. I've sat in on some of these interviews, and to get everything done, you need 6-7 hours minimum, and sometimes a couple of those. There's a lot of stuff you got to talk about, and it's not. Some people think, well, he's a name. Offer him all the money you can and you'll get him. There's a lot more to it than that. You got to know who his staff's going to be. And what's different and what's changed a lot, and I said this on my regular show a few times, is like when we hired Lovey 20 years ago.
It has been about 20 years. Wow.
It's 21 years now.
21 years. Wow.
So,
since we had a good head coach.
Right. Lovey, Lovey had an idea who he wanted on the staff, but he couldn't just go out and get them because under league rules at that time, all assistant coaches were labeled together as, quote, just an assistant coach. There was no delineation between a coordinator and a position assistant or whatever. Now it's changed. And you've got to put in the title. That when you put in your proficiency slip, you're putting in the title. And if it's a better job than the guy currently has, then they have to let him interview. And so knowing that, the head coach, so let's say Johnson or whatever, he's going to pretty much know who his staff is going to be. I'm sure he's already talked to people. Now, on the outside, for people like us, we're not gonna know what that is, because you got, especially for the coordinator positions, you've got rules that you got to follow, league rules that you got to follow about who you can interview and how many minorities you have to interview, things of that nature. So, regardless of who his coordinator is going to be, we're not going to know. Let's say, if Johnson's a guy and he goes all the way to the Super Bowl, Bears aren't going to have a head coach until a few days after the Super Bowl.
Which is when is it this year? Sometime in February
8th or 9th or something like that.
Man, yeah.
So
that's a ways off. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, we're not going to know who the head coach is until 12th to 13th, and that could be the same thing with Brady too.
I mean, we can always root for the Lions to lose early, and that's one of the things I will do. I mean, I honestly don't feel like they're a Super Bowl team. I'll knock on wood, but
yeah, but who in the NFC is that? If they're not, who is?
Yeah, and that's where it's tough. I don't know this year. It's wide open, and that's why I wish we would have at least made the playoffs or.
That's why winning is important for them on Sunday night, because then they're going to play every game at Ford Field.
And that's the huge one. I mean, that comes down. It's not just for the NFC North, and that's why, as Bears fans, I think we should be watching that game, because that's our division. Those are teams we're scouting. I'm always scouting the other teams as well, but that's it. Vikings and Lions, not just for the NFC North, but for the number 1 seed in the entire NFC, home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And that'll determine, honestly, if the Lions don't win that game and the Vikings win, the road for the Lions gets much harder because they are a team. They are one of those teams that's a lot better at home. They are better in domes.
No question.
And they'll be fine in Minnesota, but if they have to go outside to who are the other division winners right now? Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay won't be very cold. Who's winning the NFC West right now?
Well, let me because I get confused. I don't look at this that carefully because the Bears aren't involved.
I know. I haven't either. Yeah, I'm focusing on draft.
And I may be totally wrong on this, Swifty, but I'm thinking that they could lose the game and have a 14-3 record, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're a wild card team, not a division winner. But they're not going to be the number 2 seed with the second best record. They drop down in seeding because they're a wild card team. All the division winners are ahead of them, I think.
Exactly. Yep. Well, yeah, all division winners get a higher seed, even if you have a better record. So if the Lions go 14-3, right, they would still have to go on the road.
The best they can be is a 5 seed.
Yeah, and play a team that would get a home field advantage, like the Tampa Bay Bucks, who are 9-7, or the Rams, who are 10-6.
Right.
One of those teams will host a home matchup against the loser of the Vikings-Lions game.
Mm-hmm.
So the team that loses this game is going to be on the road for every.
Well, Tampa's got to win too, because that's the only thing that's really up for. Well, there's a few up for grabs in the AFC, but as far as the NFC goes, there's still a battle for who's going to win the NFC South. And it's going to be, I think it's the Tampa plays Atlanta. I think it's the winner of that game.
I gotta address this comment real quick. Swift, you've been hollering the Lions aren't this or that all season. The Lions are better on the road. I haven't said a word about the Lions not being great. I love the Lions. I love the way their team was built. My issue with the Detroit Lions is I do not think Jared Goff is special. I've said this on here. I've talked about it 50 times. Taking my words out of context is crazy, but the Lions are a very great team. They're built strong. They're tough. Jared Goff is just only as good as the talent around him, in my opinion. He is. But I'm going to
say one thing just to argue a little bit, and not really arguing, is I up until this year I would have been with you 100%.
Yeah.
That son of a bitch has been really good.
He's played really good, and that I'm not trying to take anything away from. That's just they're talking about what I've said in the past, and that's what I've said in the past. I have always been a bit down on Jared Goff, but I do respect him. I think he's a guy who continues to battle, and in that locker room, I think he fits in great with Dan Campbell, because you have this guy who wants to bite people's kneecaps off and keep fighting, right? That's Dan Campbell, right? And then you have Jared Goff, who comes in as a guy who took his team to the Super Bowl and they didn't want him anymore. They traded him away to Detroit. So he comes in kind of as a second-hand guy. And to be fair, he has done so great in Detroit, and
Detroit won
that locker room.
I'm just not a Super Bowl, but Detroit won that trade.
Exactly. And I still think he's not an elite quarterback. When you put pressure on him, he can be beaten. We've seen him.
I've always said you punch him in the mouth, and he can go down real quick. But at the same time,
lots of them.
This year he has played so freaking good. So and part of it I think is Johnson, and that's one of the reasons why you could say, well, Johnson
and that O-line
for the Bears, because not only are you getting a good play caller and offensive coach for the Bears, but you're hurting the Lions because you're taking their guy away from them. But the one thing, and I'm not going to change this one narrative, is nobody can guarantee any of us that Johnson's going to be a good head coach. Nobody can say that Vrabel's going to be. But about Vrabel because he's done it.
He has a floor, but you still don't.
He took Tennessee to the playoffs 3 times. The one year they got to the AFC Championship game.
But they had another year where they were the number 1 seed, had the first round bye, and lost that first game at home to the Bengals. So there's that disappointment there too. That
right. but his team, for the most part, the last 2 years, and part of it, I mean, I have to really study it, but I like the GM they had. I like him as a person. I've known him a long time. John Robinson, who was no longer there. But I don't think John did a great job getting Vrabel players. And that didn't help, the team, and you can include free agency in that part of it too. So Vrabel
quarterback was Ryan Tannehill. I mean,
he never had a quarterback. When you think about it, that whole time he was there, he never had a quarterback.
That's truth. And the bottom line is quarterbacks win in the NFL.
Yeah.
They're difference makers. It comes down to quarterbacks and head coaches. And that's the biggest thing. Head coaches matter. And I think this is one thing that's overlooked a lot when it comes down to our record this season. We live in a microwave society. Everyone wants instant success. The only thing our fans care about are wins and losses. They don't care that we had a ton of close games and Eberflus blew away a lot of those games. But to me, I think people overlook how much coaching matters. You look around the NFL at teams like the Packers and the Steelers, and they have coaches like Mike Tomlin and Matt LaFleur. And these coaches have managed to never have losing seasons because no matter what happens around them, the Steelers haven't been – if you look at the Steelers, and Mike Tomlin's the most impressive to me because they haven't had a quarterback since Roethlisberger retired. Now, I'm not talking mostly this season. Russ and Justin Fields have both played well. But before that, they've been with guys like Kenny Pickett and just stragglers in the NFL. And he still has never had a losing season. And that's how much head coaches matter. And we saw Lovie Smith was the last coach we had that was able to do that. Even when we had bad seasons and injured quarterbacks, we'd still win at least 8 games every year. Because that's
I think we had one. I think we had 2 losing seasons under Lovie. The one was our first one.
Mm-hmm. We didn't have a quarterback.
Well, so we hadn't put the team together. We had to completely revamp the roster because of the difference in the style. Well, the difference in the style of play too on the defensive side.
True,
so we had to find players that could. That first draft we drafted Tommy Harris and Tank because we didn't have a 3-10.
TNT, baby, TNT. Yeah, you were coming in. They had Keith Traylor and Ted Washington.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we had these big elephants. That 3 of the 4 starters and Greg Blotch is a good friend and he was a good coordinator. Entirely different philosophy than Lovie had, and he played a 4-3, but with old 3-4 principles with a lot of 2-gapping and stuff. And so like Philip Daniels was about 315, 320. Traylor and Washington were somewhere over 350. And I don't know if anybody knows exactly except Rusty Jones because they were big dudes. And and then there was Alex Brown at 48.
Yep.
We had one speed lineman in that group. They were big 2-gappers who could stop the run. It's a bitch to run against those guys now. But we got rid of Daniels, Traylor, and Washington that offseason because we knew they couldn't play in Lovie's scheme.
But Tommy Harris was honestly in my life as a Bears fan. Tommy Harris is up there in the top 3 of my favorite Bears we've ever landed. He's one of those rare situations where, as a guy who evaluates the draft and watches college football, I thought Tommy Harris was a perfect fit. Probably 6 months before the draft, he was my favorite player on Oklahoma. And then coming to Chicago, if he would have been healthy in 2006, we're Super Bowl champions. And I still believe that to this day.
Mike Brown, too, would have helped.
Yeah, Mike Brown is right there with him. If they're both healthy, there's the bigger part of that is that busted coverage Danielle Manning had on the Reggie Wayne touchdown.
Right. But Mike Brown to the defense is Olin. I mean, not as physically intimidating. He was to the defense as Olin was to the offense, as far as the leader of the group, the leader. And, you don't have him and you don't have Tommy. You're going into that game shorthanded. Hey, it is what it is.
It is.
We still had opportunities to win and we didn't do it.
Yep. I love those guys, man. TNT. But everyone in the chat is asking about coaches. Do you have thought on this guy? They're talking about Pete Carroll. Do you have any thoughts on Pete Carroll and him coming to Chicago and whether or not you'd be a fan?
When I interview, the one thing I can say is I've been through this. I've been part of the process twice in my career. So I know what it's like. Does he have a serious chance of being the head coach? In my opinion, no. He's the same age as me. He's going to be 74 years old before the start. I turned 74 in May. I think he's around the same time that he'll turn 74. And at that age, being that that's my age, things change real quick. And Pete's a good coach. I was with Pete 1 year, 1980, and not even just really part of the year, because then I went to the Giants. I was working part-time for Buffalo, and Pete was hired in January or February by Kay Stevenson as the defensive back coach, and that's his first ever NFL job. And real good coach back then. And so he has stuck around, throughout the USC part because he was there as head coach. But I mean, he's been part of the NFL for almost 40 years, except for the NFL thing. He's a good coach. But at 74, how the hell long is he going to coach?
That's not a long-term option.
Yeah. And so why would you do that? Knowing that, you can say to yourself, well, I can expect 2 years. And you can't say anything more than that because of what can happen health-wise.
And another thing I like to point out to that one, too, that Bears fans will sure get a kick out of is his last offensive coordinator in Seattle was Shane Waldron. So
right.
That's the guy with the connections you're bringing in here. But people are talking a lot about Ben Johnson. One of the questions in chat is, would you still take Ben Johnson if he demands Poles not be the GM?
Well, first, let's clear that up. That is a horseshit rumor.
Boom.
So just roll it out.
I said it too. Yep.
Okay.
I didn't think so.
That is internet fodder. That means absolutely nothing. Now, let's be serious about this for a second. He has never coached a game in the NFL in his life yet, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What gives him the right to say, I want a certain GM besides nothing? Do you know how many people can do that? Bill Belichick and Andy Reid.
Yeah.
That's it.
He is a highly demanded head coach, but I felt the same way. And I also feel like people in the NFL are separated so farly from what the media thinks. And I believe people in the NFL respect Ryan Poles. I believe
I know for a fact he's respected around the league.
Yeah, fans just only care about wins and losses. They don't see just the way what he's done for the operation as far as the young talent he's added, how he's actually building through the draft, how he's fixed our salary cap, how we have extra draft picks going forward. We went from a team that was pretty much at rock bottom we didn't have much future. If you go back 5 years and after Matt Nagy was fired that last year, our future was so bleak. We didn't have a old team,
a real old and overpaid team.
Yeah, old team, overpaid team, no cap space, no draft picks, no young talent on the roster. It was bare. Things were bad. It was probably the worst it had ever been in my life as a Bears fan. It's up there. There might have been some other times that were very bleak, but it was so bleak. And now we have all this young talent, all this cap space. We finally have a franchise QB, something that we've all been asking for our entire lives. And people just forget about it because we only won 4 games. And to me, it's crazy. I think there's zero chance Ryan Poles goes anywhere. So we'll go to the next.
I agree with you on that. And I've said this numerous times over the last couple of weeks. if Ryan Poles was not going to be here, he'd already be gone.
Hmm.
He would have been sent out the door with flus. And go back to that presser that Monday after Thanksgiving. What did Warren say? He said Ryan Poles is going to be here.
Mm-hmm.
So is he going to be a liar? I don't think so. You know, it's the fans that are calling for that. And some of the radio people, David Hall was on the radio this morning screaming and hollering for it. You got to fire him. It isn't happening. It would have. There's not a doubt in my mind. And here's one of the reasons why. And I'm like a broken record with some of this because I've said it with Aldo, is that since the day Flus got fired, and probably before that, because he knew he was going to go, he's been already working on who the next coach is going to be, doing a lot of background. And you got to do a ton of background. And making calls, talking to people who've worked with some of these people, trying to find out as much about each candidate that he can. I assume he's probably going to interview about 10.
10. Whew. That's a wide net. I actually like the wide net, but I kind of feel
but
like
out of 10, there's probably going to be 3 or 4 that are meaningless, or rather 3 or 4 that have some meaning to them, and all the rest are, some of them are going to be courtesy interviews or whatever. Sometimes you interview a guy just to get just to get information about him and his scheme, things like that. So, you know, but early on, again, if the guys like John, let's say guys like Johnson and Brady are strong candidates, you can't hire them until they're done anyway. So you're not hurting yourself interviewing other people.
You got to get in the other interviews. I kind of want maybe not that wide of a net. I think last time, I don't remember exactly how many we interviewed, but it was a lot. I kind of want them to have a more focused list, maybe 5 to 8 is what I'm hoping.
The thing is, though, Swifty, is right now there's 3 openings. Okay. By Monday, there might be 6, 7, 8. You know, Jacksonville's going to be in there.
Oh, yep.
Dallas may be in there, and there's probably going to be a few more. So now you got to protect yourself. You got to think about the downside. And you know, because for whatever reason, you might not get one of your top 3. In my mind, the top 3, and I may be totally off base on this, and in no particular order: Vrabel, Johnson, Brady.
So we say Mike Vrabel, Ben Johnson, and Joe Brady. If anyone's not familiar, that's the offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen out there. Yeah.
And I think, and I thought Brady outcoached Johnson in that game of Buffalo against Detroit a few weeks ago in Detroit. But that's one game. And Josh Allen does not have the weapons on offense this year that Goff has in Detroit. So there's been a lot of creativity that Brady uses. My main concern with Brady is the same as it is with Cohen, and that is age and experience. But Brady has had, this is his 4th year in the league. He was 2 years at Carolina as the OC. And from what I understand, somebody who did a lot of research on it, there was a huge personality conflict between Brady and Rule when Rule was the head coach there.
Mm-hmm.
I still haven't found out a lot about it, but this guy has done a lot of work and swears by it. So that could have had something that played into part of the poor play, because Rule by himself just wasn't a very good head coach. Good college coach. The pro game was too much for him. So he leaves Carolina, goes to Buffalo, and for like a year and a half, so this is actually his 5th year in the league. For like a year and a half, he's the quarterback coach. And Dorsey, who is now in Cleveland, is the coordinator. Dorsey could not get the job done. Dorsey was the quarterback coach under Brian Daboll. and they elevated him to the coordinator's position when Daboll went to New York, and it just didn't work out. The offense became stagnant. So they fired Dorsey in the middle of last year, and they elevate Brady to the OC position. And it's like that right away the offense took off. And the way he utilizes the run, I think, is just spectacular. You know, they got a very strong running team. Detroit's got a very strong running team. You better be able to run. If you really want to win in the playoffs, you better be able to run the football.
Always. You have to run in that cold weather football.
But it's just his age. I think he's 35. I got it here.
Who are we talking about? Oh, Joe Brady?
Yeah, Brady is he's 35.
35.
Okay, so and I think Cohen is the same age, but Cohen 1 year as a full-fledged offensive coordinator, play caller in the National Football League. Okay, he's got, I think, a total of 3 years in the league, but only and one of those years, 2022. He was the coordinator for the Rams, but let's face it, when you're the coordinator for the Rams, you got a title.
Yeah.
Sean McVay he's the play caller, he's the coordinator. You're doing McVay's thing. Mm-hmm. Before that, he was a quarterback coach in the Rams, and in between, he's like quarterback coach of the Rams, goes to Kentucky because he wants to be a play caller. And he goes to Kentucky as the offensive coordinator, and he's the play caller. And that was, Tennessee's quarterback was a junior that year, or might have been a sophomore year, but because he came out after his junior year. But anyway, he had probably his best year. But he leaves then. Cohen leaves, goes back to the Rams this time, and this is for the 22 season. And he's the coordinator, but just in name only, and really the quarterback play at Kentucky really fell off with Cohen not there. So that's a testament to him. But then because he knows he can never be a play caller in the Rams, he leaves again and goes back to Kentucky. So he was there in 23, and now he's in Tampa Bay. He's been in 5 places.
He's done a hell of a job in Tampa Bay. I will say that, yeah.
No question. Yeah. But he's been 5 jobs in 5 years.
Q was actually asking him. Q in the chat says that's his number 2 guy behind Ben Johnson. So I did want to bring up Liam Cohen. I think he's done a hell of a job with Baker Mayfield. You have to give him a little bit of credit there. He's done a great job after Dave
There's
Canales
no question,
left.
But he's another guy that's 35 years old.
Yep.
And his total experience in the league is minimal. Now you can take Johnson. Johnson's been in the league since freaking 2012.
Yeah.
So I mean that makes it. I got it. When did he come in? 2011. This is his 15th season in the NFL, and he's only 38 years old. So even though he's only been a coordinator 3 full years, he spent a lot of time in the league. Really only with 2 franchises, Miami and then Detroit.
Yep.
But he's had a lot, 15 years in the league is 15 years in the league, or 14 years in the league. That's a long time to pick up things and learn things. So his experience is so much better than Brady and Cohen. So, I mean, I think as much as I like Brady, I think there's a huge drop off.
Yep. I'll get to more on that in just a minute. But to me, I kind of want one of those younger guys versus an older guy like a Vrabel, or Q had another question here. He wants to know what you think about Mike McCarthy, another guy that I know he's had a lot of success in the NFL, but I would rather take a chance on any of those younger guys and hope we hit a home run with them and get the next Kevin O'Connell or Matt LaFleur. That's what I want to aim for. Not an older coach who's had some success but has been fired. I'd rather take a chance and go for a home run hire. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I wouldn't even waste my time talking to him.
About McCarthy? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's my own person.
Not for Mike. Okay.
Yeah. To me, he's just like Pete Carroll, but he's younger.
Yep.
Vrabel, I think, is a different story. I mean, Vrabel's only 48 or 49.
Yeah.
And
what, John Gruden, same thing, or
Gruden, I don't think can get a job.
yeah, I think Gruden's nuts. I don't know if people have seen it, but I've said this to people in the comments. He's doing a whole YouTube bit. He has his whole YouTube channel now where he talks.
Yeah, I know that. I haven't watched.
He's got a
it, but I know
Chucky
about
doll with him and stuff, and he's kind of cuckoo, man. He's a little cuckoo. And
He's
shout
always
out
been
to
that
Ken.
way.
Thank you. But yeah,
His dad used to be a good friend of mine. His dad was a scout for the 49ers, and we were both we were making a school called Tennessee, and John Gruden was only a GA back then. That's how long I've been doing this bullshit. But he's, after what happened with him with the Raiders, with the emails, and he got fired, he may never see a job again. And he's got a lawsuit going. And the same thing could be said about Flores. And Flores, there's some different things. Flores is a great defensive coach. Can't take that away from him. He failed miserably as a head coach for a lot of reasons, and there's stuff I can't get into.
Yeah, if there's stuff behind the scenes that people don't know about, that's another thing that'll keep these guys from becoming head coaches.
Right. Well, the people that are supposed to know. Mm-hmm. I mean, you just got to call up the Miami general manager, and he can give you an earful. Chris Greer, I mean, there was a lot of shit that went on between the two of them there. I know a guy, I'll tell one story, who the one offensive coordinator retired, and so he was leaving. So he had to get a new coordinator. And this would have been for his last year in Miami. So a guy I know goes into interview for the job, and he's offered the job. But before he decides to accept it or reject it, he starts calling some of the guys that were on the staff, that were currently on the staff, and the previous coordinator. They all said the same thing to him: keep the fuck away. Quote, because
stay away.
He won't let you do what you want to do. He's a micromanager, and he's going to make you do what he wants to do.
That was Flores, right? Just to remind us. Yeah.
Yes. And so this guy that I know said, I wouldn't get, if I can't do what I want to do, I'm not taking the job.
Yep. And then Keith had a good question here, and this I kind of want to. I'm interested in this. You said the top three you think the Bears are currently interested in would be Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel, and who was the third you said?
Brady.
Oh yeah, Joe Brady, the coordinator for the Bills. But who is your personal top two favorites?
My top two would be Johnson and Vrabel. And the one thing,
Johnson and Vrabel. Okay.
I know it. I know what I'm getting from Vrabel. He's already been a head coach. You know what he is. Okay, where with all these other guys, you still don't know what you're buying. You're not going to know what you're buying until they're already in the building. They can try to sell you on the fact, and you can get what you hope is a pretty good idea, but you're still not going to know. And you could get in situations where, you hired the wrong guy, like Flus did with Williams, and you got to fire your defensive coordinator and shit like that. And
it's tough, but
that's when part of it, see, Swifty, part of your interview process is throwing scenarios like that at the guy.
Yep.
And then
that's what we did when we hired Waldron, though. They said they threw every possible scenario at him, and they were asking, what would you do on this down and this distance and in the red zone and in the goal line and on fourth down, and that led him to hire.
I think I handed it to my center, who's never carried the ball before in his life, so he can fumble.
The good old Doug. Hey, now I will say this much about that. Like, if things would have been different, Doug Kramer scores that touchdown.
Oh, it would have been a great call.
Manages games better. Like, that would have been one of the best calls in Bears history. Because it was a throwback to the refrigerator. And I think Doug Kramer's a guy that we all root for and like. He's from Illinois. He's undersized. He was center at University of Illinois for a while, but I'm with you. I'm not sure how I feel on Vrabel. I've definitely been hesitant to kind of fully embrace hiring Mike Vrabel. To me, it feels like that would be a fallback plan. Like that's your John Fox type of hire, a guy you're bringing in because you're scared to fail. You're scared to swing for the fences again and strike out. You don't want to hire another unproven guy like Ben Johnson because you don't want to take the chance that he turns out to be Matt Nagy or Matt Eberflus or Mark Trestman or whatever. So to me, that's the safe choice. But that's the one.
Well, here's where I disagree with you. I mean, like you used John. John was in his 60s. He'd already been a head coach. He'd been head coach
but
twice.
He was a guy he had been a head coach, and he was more brought in for the culture purposes. And because
he was brought in because they had a rookie. The real reason is they had a rookie general manager, and they wanted to pair a rookie general manager with a veteran head coach.
Yeah.
Okay, which is not the case right now. Because, I mean, when you look at, like, when we hired Lovey, Jerry's experience and Pohl's experience as a GM is identical. 3 years as a GM.
Yeah.
And you know, I said this the other day with Aldo. I said, theoretically, with all the screaming that people are doing about Pohl's, they could have done the same thing about us when before we hired Lovey. Why are you keeping him? They haven't won anything. But it was a situation that we walked into, and we knew it when we got the job.
Yep, 100%. For me, my guy, just another year, Chicago, he said his favorites are Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel, and Mike McCarthy. I'm definitely not a McCarthy fan, but he threw Kyle Shanahan in there. I don't think there's any chance Shanahan
no chance in hell.
But if he did, instantly would go to the top of my list. But
yeah,
there are a couple names.
Question. But you can throw that one out. That is never going to happen.
I think that's never. But there are a couple names that people have mentioned that might possibly get fired, and there's two guys I like a little bit. What would be your thoughts if Brian Daboll or Mike McDaniel from the Dolphins, those two guys, there's rumors that I don't think either guy will get fired. I think they're both good head coaches. If one or both of those guys got fired, I would be interested. I am fans of both of them. What are your thoughts on them?
Well, I've always liked Daboll, and I wanted him to be like a finalist for the Bears job a few years ago. They're in the same cycle. They had a problem. I don't know what the problem. I could find out because of my connections in New York, but obviously had a problem with Wink Martindale, who was his original defensive coordinator, and Martindale quit. So you got to find out what that was all about, because there was a disconnect with your defensive coordinator. He inherited a quarterback. It wasn't, and the Giants extended him. He had a real good year, Daboll's first year, and so they were almost forced to extend him. It was like, to a different degree, when we came in here, we were told we could hire a head coach after the first year, but then, Dick Geron goes 13-3, and we got to extend him. You got no choice, even though you knew it wasn't the right thing to do. Well, I think that's exactly what happened with the Giants and Daniel Jones.
Yeah, multiple people clapping back here that they don't think Brian Daboll is a great coach. They say he's a great offensive coordinator, but he
is a great offensive coordinator. And
they continue to bring up his record. I just wanted to quickly point out, guys, we got to quit judging people by just their record when they don't have
circumstances
the talent
involved. You got to take in the circumstances.
He's an offensive guy, and Daniel Jones, to me, is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, and he kind of was stuck in that situation. I would love to see what Daboll is able to do with another talented quarterback. So to me,
Josh Allen is who he is because of one person, Brian Daboll.
I believe that as well. I think he really, if you look at his first 2 years in the NFL, Josh Allen was Mitch Trubisky level quarterback. And
Yep.
that's a true statement. You can go look at Josh Allen's stats his first 2 years, compare him to Mitch Trubisky, and you're going to be like, ooh.
His first 2 years in the league, he was like 54 and 58% as a passer.
Yep.
Then in his third year, now he had Daboll the whole time.
Under 60%, yeah.
And now in his third year, he got Stephon Diggs, which helped, but it was also, don't forget, he came from Wyoming and more of a running style offense, not one of these heavy passing style offenses. And Daboll had him his entire time. He had him as a rookie, but it took him time. He had to, and part of it too was the football character. Josh Allen is way up here.
Oh, yeah.
He wants to be a great player. He is so competitive. And so he would do everything.
Mental aspect is huge. And to me, Daniel Jones, you can see it in his face with the deer in the headlights look. That mental aspect has never been there with Daniel Jones.
But, from year 2 to year 3, Josh Allen's completion percentage jumped by 10 points.
Oh, yep.
You never see that. That was all Daboll.
My guy Nick says Daboll also had 9 wins in his first year, 7 in his second and third, and 3 in his third. No progression. His coordinators walked out. Why couldn't he make Jones like Josh Allen? I'll say quickly here, there's something that goes with quarterbacks having success, and I think a lot of people miss this in the NFL. You can look at examples of guys like Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold. When you surround them with talent, if they have a great offensive line and weapons and a good head coach, you can get the most out of a quarterback. The situation in New York where you have Daniel Jones, who, in my opinion, first off, he isn't as talented as those other guys. I've never been a fan of Daniel Jones.
Doesn't have the instincts.
He's not Baker Mayfield. He's not Sam Darnold. To me, no matter where he goes, even if he was starting for the Vikings right now, he wouldn't have as much success.
Daniel Jones is Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, he's Mitch Trubisky. Yeah, I've always liked that comparison. I think Mitch Trubisky and Daniel Jones, there's something just not there in their head.
Right.
And you see it when you watch them extensively. They get in trouble, and it's like they don't know what to do. They panic, and they're just like panicked in the pocket. They're panicked with the football. They're panicked rushing their throws. And it's just an overall sense of how can the other players on the team, if you're a running back or an offensive lineman or a wide receiver, how can you look at that guy and say, I believe that guy can lead us down the field and win? And that has been missing with Daniel Jones, Mitch Trubisky, other guys in the NFL that just don't have it. And so to me, it's hard to judge Brian Daboll. I still say his name, Brian Daboll. It's hard to judge him when he did not have a quarterback that I believe has the talent to win in the NFL.
No, I agree with that. And on top of that, now they've gone out and spent high draft picks on offensive linemen to get a good offensive line.
Yep.
And
it's improved.
But, out.
Yeah, it hasn't.
Thomas
Andrew
has been
Thomas
okay.
Is good. Yeah, he's okay.
Okay, but not. He was like a top 5 pick. He didn't play him like a top 5
superstar. Yeah.
Okay, then they took the other guy, Deal from Alabama. Nah, he hadn't done shit. Everybody loved that center from Minnesota a couple years ago.
Oh yeah, John Michael Schmidt has not worked out either. Yeah,
he hadn't done shit. So, that's 3 high picks. I think the center was a 2nd round pick, maybe a 3rd. The 2 tackles were first. They had, they've had to go out then in free agency and fix it up. So he hasn't had the line, and his receiving core has been average. So I just think that the personnel department in New York has not done what they should be doing to help, that football team.
Yeah, and I think Joe Schoen, and that's if you want to blame a guy in New York, I think and that's something I loved. If you guys haven't watched the off-season edition of Hard Knocks, I know almost all of us probably watched the Bears edition.
That was really good. The one with the Giants last year.
But the Giants one, the offseason, because it focused on the stuff in the offseason that we don't get to see. Behind the scenes talk of free agency. We got to see people want to talk about Saquon Barkley. The Bears were in on Saquon, but Saquon made his decision to go to the Eagles before free agency had even started. And that was shown on there. But you also saw showing the Giants GM. There was a few moments in that show where you're just watching and you're like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. So that's another problem for the Giants, that their GM isn't doing the right job around him. So it's just tough. It's a tough situation there. But I am a fan of Daboll, and I really like Mike McDaniel in Miami. Did you want to touch on Mike McDaniel at all?
I love his offensive mind. I think he struck out as a head coach. I really do. I've been disappointed. His teams have not been very good.
They've been good every year. They fall apart when they get to the playoffs. And to me, it's another situation
they might not even make the playoffs this year. I think they've only made the playoff one time. And, so he's
in 3 years.
He's better. You expected more from him and his defense has always been and part of it, change the subject a little bit here, but part of it is when you interview Vrabel for this job, the most important thing is who's your offensive coordinator and who's your offensive line coach, because he's a defensive guy.
Yep.
So that's the key. So, and I was thinking, I said this one with Aldo. I said, if Daboll got hired and I'm Vrabel, that's my coordinator. And so I even went back.
If we could bring in Vrabel with Daboll,
I went back to check to see if there's a connection.
Yeah.
And there is. There was when Vrabel was playing in New England, Daboll was an assistant coach. They were together for 5 years.
Hey, I like it. That is a good point. Let me double check for more questions here. I think we touched on almost all of the head coaching candidates.
Oh, well, did we? We didn't talk about Kingsbury.
Oh, Kingsbury was the other one brought up in chat. I thought I remember you're not a fan of Kingsbury.
I think, I tell you, to me, one of the sleeper candidates in the league is Aaron Glenn.
I like Aaron Glenn. Again, I still want an offensive guy.
I get that. I'm just saying is the ability to become a head coach.
I want to touch on this a bit because I actually have a video on this coming out. Caleb Williams talked about it. He blamed himself and said, look, the offensive line, I'm sick of everyone saying the offensive line is bad. And I actually found a chart on Twitter. Caleb Williams is responsible for a higher percentage of sacks than any quarterback in the last 15 years. That's any rookie, any veteran, any backup. Caleb Williams is taking a higher percentage of the sacks have been his fault than any quarterback. And it's a rough stat. I'm not trying to hate on Caleb, but I will say he has held the ball too long, and that has made that has hurt our offensive line and made them look worse than they are.
What Caleb does to a fault, and he's got to break the habit. And part of that is who's coaching him, because your coach has got to drill it into you, is he's waiting for the big play instead of taking what's there.
And he's also, they also have, I think it was Fluce's problem the whole time, ultra conservative. And he was probably preaching, don't turn the ball over. Don't turn the ball over. Don't make a stupid pass. Make sure someone's wide open. Because I felt like that's the same thing that Fluce did with Justin Fields. They made him play ultra conservative,
robotic,
and they took the home run aspect out of his game, kind of that headhunter, always looking for the big shot and looking to stretch the field. They took that out of Justin Fields' game. So to me, I think the biggest priority this offseason with the head coach is finding a quarterback developer that can make sure we have Caleb Williams on the right path and we can get the most out of our franchise quarterback. To me, that's the most important thing, because I do believe Caleb has more talent than any quarterback we've ever had. But
no question,
he does have some things that he needs to be developed. Now, so if you bring in a defensive guy, that offensive coordinator suddenly becomes the most important hire in
there's
team
no
history.
question, and that is all
So
key. You don't
that's why I want
hire
an offensive guy.
you don't hire Vrabel until you know who his coordinator is, offensive line coach. Two most important, the four most important assistant coaches are your two coordinators and your two line coaches. You have to get those right.
Yeah, Chris Morgan's got to go. We know that.
Well, he's gone. So
the whole staff's gone. Yeah.
Could there be a holdover? Yeah. I mean, Big Z wrote it the other day. There could be a couple holdovers.
Did he say who? Did he have names?
No, he doesn't. I mean, that would be up to whoever the
I thought there might be someone he just thought was good enough.
I don't think I don't think he was lobbying for anybody. It was just that, I mean, generally speaking, there are not, I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but a good percentage of the time, there's usually a couple holdovers.
Yeah.
But it's got to be somebody who's a pretty good coach.
Yeah. Do you think there's any chance Thomas Brown comes back as offensive coordinator? I'd say no, but wanted to hear. Yeah, I didn't think so. I think
I like him. He took over an awful situation. He's not really using his offense, even though his offense comes from that same McVay tree. It's how he's had to make changes on the fly, which is not easy to do. And, I thought his play calling was good the first couple games, but I think it's gone downhill since he took over the head coaching role.
Yep.
There's just a lot on his plate, and it's tough for him. And the team hasn't. What you needed is the team to respond, and the team hasn't responded.
Yep. I believe they tried at times, but overall, it just wasn't there. And I think once he was hired as a head coach, it becomes weird to bring him back. If he would have just been the offensive coordinator at the end of the year still, then there's a chance a defensive coach could have came in and said, hey, we want to keep that continuity with Caleb. We want to keep him as offensive coordinator. But once he became head coach and that power dynamic shifted, I don't think another head coach wants to come in and say, hey, let's take this guy who was just the head coach last week and have him stay on the staff. I don't think that's a realistic situation.
I don't think that's ever happened.
Yeah, I just don't see. I don't think it's ever happened. I don't see it happening. But I do think he could be hired as an offensive coordinator for another team. I think it's very likely that happens. If not, he'll at least be a quarterback coach or an offensive
quarterback or running back coach. I mean, he's
with like a running game coordinator, a higher title. If not, he'd go back and work underneath Sean McVay. I think McVay would take him back.
McVay loves him.
Yeah.
McVay loves him.
So he definitely is going to get hired somewhere. I think Thomas Brown will be fine. But to me, I do want the offensive guy. I think developing Caleb Williams, and even more to that point, the other offensive starters we've drafted in the top 10, Darnell Wright and Rome Odunze, we have 3 top 10 picks all on the offensive side of the ball. And I think those guys' development is the biggest thing for our franchise going forward, especially Caleb Williams. So that's my biggest point on why I want an offensive guy. I'm not against the defensive guys. I think Vrabel, a lot of reasons to like Vrabel, a lot of reasons to like Brian Flores if there weren't for that other stuff going on. But to me, I'm still, Cliff Kingsbury's the guy we didn't talk about. I'll say I've always been a little iffy on Cliff, but with the success he's had in Washington this year and the fact that he has been a head coach before, he has called plays, and he's now worked with 2 quarterbacks that he's had success with that are mobile, Kyler Murray, and he's worked with Jaden Daniels in the NFL, also worked with Patrick Mahomes in college. I would say Cliff is a sleeper candidate for me right now. I don't know if he's my number 2 behind Ben Johnson, but he might be my number 3. I'm still working on that process over the next week.
Here's my problem with Cliff. Number one, who's his defensive coaches? That's
Yeah,
important.
that's a tough one. Yeah.
Okay, and then look at his record as a head coach. He's never won. He won a second year in Arizona, and that was it. And then went downhill real
But
quick.
the part of that is, I think one thing that people overlook there, that third year, Kyler Murray tore his ACL, and then he was out the entire next year. So you're missing a lot when Kyler Murray was out there. So
I'm not a big Kyler Murray fan to begin
yeah,
with. I mean,
but and that's also the quarterback he had.
true,
So
but he had Patrick Mahomes in college and he didn't win.
true.
Okay, so it's what. That's why I couldn't figure out how he got the one job. You know, when he got hired originally by Arizona, you're going, what are they hiring him on?
Yep. He got it quick.
I was in college and couldn't win.
Yep. Now I'll tell you, the coach, if he wouldn't have just re-signed, I love Marcus Freeman, and he showed it on a national stage last night. I love that guy. I wish he was an option because he's a guy who just.
No, I don't think he's in. And I like Marcus, how we drafted Marcus.
Yeah.
But I think he's in his game. That's
yeah. I think he's gonna. I think he's stuck there, and he's gonna do a great job.
He's a college coach. He's dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds is a lot different than dealing with 22 to 35-year-olds.
100%. Yeah.
And I think he's in his element right there. He does a great job. He gets Notre Dame. And he buys into that stigma of Notre Dame and what the school's all about, and the kids love him. So why would he even want to take? He's got the world by the balls right now. Why would he even 5, 6, 7 years from now? He's still a young guy. He's not even 40 years old yet.
Yeah, he's a young dude. Yeah. And Nick says 11-5. He did go 11-5 in the NFC West one year. Nothing to sneeze about. And that was the year that was the year before Kyler got hurt. You have to imagine if Kyler didn't get hurt, they would have won a little bit more over those next 2 years. But yeah, I agree. Tough situation there, but I'm still iffy on.
He was stuck. Now, in fairness to
he's growing on me. Go ahead.
In fairness to him, he was stuck with one of the world's worst GMs.
Yeah, another problem. That was another issue down there. Now they had some hope. They signed J.J. Watt that one year, and I remember there was some off-season hype heading their way. But they're a team that never really lived up to expectations. But I will say Cliff is a sleeper candidate for me, and a guy that I'll be keeping an eye on over the next couple of weeks. We have our game Sunday.
It's interesting. I gotta admit that it's interesting to me. I keep saying it. Okay, I know he can run the offense.
Mm-hmm.
He's had between two places 7 or 8 years as being a head coach between college and the NFL. So he's got a lot of experience being the head guy. And then I think a year working with Quinn, who is a very good head coach, that's got to help him a lot too. See, to me, Quinn is like Vrabel's like Quinn. That's why I like Vrabel, because you're getting Quinn. But the whole key with Kingsbury is, just like with Vrabel, the key is who's going to run your offense. With Cliff, it's who's going to run your defense.
Did Vrabel? I thought Vrabel, did he run a 4-3 or a 4?
He was kind of both. I got to go back and look. And nobody runs a real true 3-4 anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a base 3-4 though, but he did a lot of 3-3-5 nickel too.
Right.
But the difference is, I mean, if we switch, I don't know. That's another issue for me with Vrabel is our defense right now, almost all the talent is built around a 4-3. And I know most of the time we're going to be
you look at the linemen that the Bears have, and you look at the linemen that Tennessee had when he was there, there's not a big difference.
Yeah, that's true. I will say that.
Okay, so I mean, you look at size-wise, athleticism, those types of things. Hell, Walker played really good for Vrabel.
Yeah. Another point here, people are bringing up the name of Robert Saleh. Apparently, he's connected. The rumor I've seen, at least in chat today, is that they want Ben Johnson, and they think that Robert Saleh could come over with them as DC. If that's an option, I would be a fan of that. Do you have any thoughts on that one, or Saleh in general?
Well, no, I mean, yeah, on paper it's great.
Yeah.
What's the connection between Johnson and Saleh?
I don't think I saw one.
I know they've never worked together.
Yeah. Maybe
You know,
they're
so
friends outside of here.
Right. I mean, it could be. Yeah. I mean, from that standpoint, it's good, but guys go after coaches hire people that they very seldom hire strangers. They hire people that they know, that they've either worked with, or they come highly recommended from people they have worked with and people they can trust.
Yep.
Because they don't want it. It's their ship. They don't want anybody rocking the boat.
100%. And I think that's about it for today. I will say, Greg, it's been an honor always doing these shows with you. It's always fun. Happy New Year. We're in a new year now, 2025. We're going to be changing the focus to off season after this. We got the NFL draft coming up. And I believe by the next time we talk 2 weeks from now, we're going to be deep into this head coaching search. We probably already had some interviews. We might have even had a second interview or two by then. So it's a big time.
I don't know about that unless, I mean, put it this way.
Not a Ben Johnson one, but someone else.
Yeah, not a Brady one either.
Yeah. But potentially someone else who's not in the playoffs or out of the playoffs. Yeah.
Now, theoretically, they could interview Vrabel today or interview him tomorrow. And they don't, you don't have to put it out that you're interviewing somebody.
True. That is true. They've done that before, the sneaky ones. Well, Happy New Year, Greg. I look forward to talking to you again in 2 weeks. And let's hope we can beat the Packers this weekend because FGB, we don't like them.
That's a given. It's just in all honesty and fairness, I haven't put 10 minutes of thought into that game.
I didn't think so. I was like, it really doesn't matter at this point, but I always want to beat the Packers. But there is a chance that we could get a top 5 pick if we don't win that game. But personally, I'm rooting for the win. As always, guys, thanks for watching and bear down.
See you later.
Bear down, Greg.